On this day, 30 years ago, a blue-haired guy without pants set out on a journey to reclaim his homeland. Back then, it may just have seemed like another generic RPG, but no one could have foreseen the insane legacy it would leave in its wake. 3 decades later, we are all here together, still enjoying the same franchise, still arguing on the internet about what characters suck and whose waifus are superior. For this momentous occasion, I thought it only prudent to do a spotlight of the character that started it all. Today, we celebrate 30 years of Fire Emblem by shining the spotlight on the original protagonist of the franchise, the Hero King, Marth.
I'm Marth, Prince of Altea. My hope is for people of all worlds to live happily.
Once upon a time, many years ago, on the continent of Archanea, the world was threatened by the Dragon Empire of Dol. Led by the Manakee King, the Earth Dragon Medeus, bent on exterminating mankind, they waged war on the humans and their kingdoms. The dragons were strong, and the humans came close to extinction, their hope fleeting. It was in this darkest hour that the hero Anri appeared, wielding the legendary sword Falchion. With it, he cut down the Dragon King and ended his reign of tyranny, saving the entire human race in the process. However, an Earth Dragon is not so easily killed, and Medeus merely slipped into a deep slumber, dreaming of revenge against the humans who had wounded him so. Many decades later, history would once again repeat itself as Medeus returned to wreak havoc on the world. He rallied the Dragon Empire of Dol around him once again and declared war upon the humans. This time, however, Medeus gathered allies to help his conquests. He intimidated the kingdom of Grust into allying with him, taking advantage of their weak and cowardly king. Out of all of his allies, however, the most dangerous and cunning of them all was the Dark Pontifex Gharnef. Gharnef concocted many schemes to aid Medeus in his conquests, such as convincing the power-hungry son of Macedon's king Michalis to kill his father, succeed the throne, and ally himself with Dol. Gharnef also kidnapped the divine Manakee girl Tiki and put her under his spell, as he knew her powers could cause problems for Medeus. Gharnef also laid plans to ensure that the Falchion would not threaten Medeus again. Anri had long since passed away at this point, but his descendant, King Cornelius of Altea, still wielded the divine sword in his place. When Cornelius left his homeland of Altea, carrying Falchion with him, he was confident that his forces would defeat Dol in the field. He did not, however, account for Gharnef manipulating his allies, the soldiers of Gra, into betraying their comrades. Attacked from behind without warning, the forces of Altea were massacred. Cornelius, realizing that the war was lost, vowed to go down fighting, and was eventually slain in battle. With Cornelius dead, Falchion lost, and the Altean army defeated, nothing remained to challenge Medeus and his conquest of the world. Not long after, Castle Altea was besieged and quickly conquered. Inside the castle was Prince Marth, the last surviving son of King Cornelius. Marth was barely able to escape with his life, alongside a small retinue of Altean knights. Forced to flee his homeland, Prince Marth and his few remaining allies went into exile. They looked for places willing to take them in, but few dared to invite the wrath of Medeus by housing the fugitive prince. Only when they fled to the small island nation of Talis were they taken in by King Mostin, an old friend of Cornelius, who agreed to shelter the Altean knights, despite the risks involved in doing so. Here, Prince Marth remained for 2 years, training with Jagan and the other knights, dreaming of one day returning to reclaim their homeland. During this time, he met Princess Shida, the daughter of Mostin, and the two spent a lot of time together, becoming close friends in the process. One day, Talis was suddenly attacked by pirates, and Marth was left with a difficult decision. He could go with his knights to defend the people of Talis, but in doing so, he would give his position away, revealing his presence to Medeus and the Empire of Dol. Marth ultimately decided that he owed a debt to Talis for sheltering them when no one else would, and so he ordered his Altean knights to ride and defend the nation, easily eliminating the pirates in the process. After the battle, however, Marth realized that staying in Talis would endanger the Quiet Island nation, and so he and his knights were forced to embark for the mainland, deciding to head to Orolus, one of the few remaining kingdoms yet to be conquered by Medeus, where Princess Nina was on the verge of defeat. Once arriving on the mainland, Marth clashed with another band of pirates who had taken over a small coastal town. After passing through the treacherous Samsuth Mountains, Marth arrived in Orlus, where the kingdom of Macedon was besieging the castle. It was here he met the young knight Hardin, a man who would later play a significant role in Arcanian history. Together with Hardin and his Wolfguard, Marth was able to lift the siege and come to Nina's aid. Grateful for his assistance, Nina gifted Marth the treasure of Arcania, the Fire Emblem, a royal shield with the insignia of Arcania embellishing it. With the Fire Emblem and Nina's blessings, Marth continued his journey, now searching for the Falchion, which was last seen being wielded by his father, Cornelius. Suspecting that the kingdom of Gra may have looted the sword from his father's corpse, Marth traveled to their kingdom to wage war on their cowardly king, Geol. After many battles, Marth was able to defeat the armies of Gra and killed King Geol in battle, but the Falchion was nowhere to be found. Suspecting that Gharnef might have taken the Falchion, Marth headed to the desert kingdom of Hardin next. There his armies faced off against Gharnef and his sorcerers. But while Marth's army was able to defeat his minions, Gharnef himself was impervious to all harm, thanks to the dark power of his tome Imhulu. In his arrogance though, Gharnef left the battle before it was done, telling Marth to come and seek him out in his temple if he wanted the Falchion. Realizing that he could not win against Gharnef, Marth decided to flee Hardin and head towards his homeland of Altea, occupied by the forces of Grusts, with a terrifying mage dragon from Dol sitting upon his father's throne. As Marth's liberation army fought their way into his country, the people greeted him with loud cheers, welcoming their rightful ruler home. Marth eventually took back his castle and killed the dragon who had slaughtered his mother. However, his sister Elis was not within the castle, apparently taken by Gharnef some time before. With his homeland secured, Marth could now begin to move against the forces who had attacked it in the first place. First, he invaded the nation of Grust, whose army was led by Camus of the Sable Order. While Camus was not thrilled about fighting Marth, as he believed his country to be on the wrong side of the war, he would not go against the wishes of his king, and as a result, he fell on the battlefield against the Knights of Altea. While in Grusts, Marth also visited the Fane of Raman, a sacred altar where the Manakite princess Tiki now lingered under Gharnef's mind-controlling magic. While she initially believed Marth and his invading army to be her enemies, the Manakite Bantu who traveled alongside Marth was able to snap Tiki out of her spell and brought her back to her senses. Grateful to be with her guardian once more, Tiki joined Marth's army, adding the might of a divine dragon to his already considerable force. Marth then traveled to the kingdom of Macedon, where the man who killed his own father to succeed the throne, Michalis, reigned with his dragoons. Before defeating Michalis, Marth met the archsage Godo in the nearby village. Godo, being a former student of magic alongside Gharnef, knew how to counter his dark magic, and so offered to create a magical spell called Starlight, using the two artifacts Marth had collected on his journey, the Star Sphere and the Light Sphere. This magical tome was capable of harming Gharnef, and with it, Marth traveled to the Dark Pontifex's temple where Gharnef awaited him. Thinking himself invincible, the Dark Bishop thanked Marth for ridding him of Camus and Michalis, whom he believed would turn on him sooner or later anyway. But he was shocked when the power of Starlight broke through Imulu's dark power, leaving him vulnerable, which would eventually lead to his demise. Upon clearing out Gharnef's temple, Marth also found his sister Elis, a bit shaken but unharmed. Grateful to be reunited with her brother, Elis joined Marth's army, vowing to keep him safe with her healing magic. With Falchion reclaimed, Marth finally set out for the Dragon Empire of Dol. This battle would be one of the toughest ones yet, as the ferocious Manakites fought hard to defend their homeland. But eventually the Altean Knights made it inside their royal palace, where the Earth Dragon King, still unable to leave his lair, awaited them. In a long and bloody confrontation against his royal guard, Marth eventually faced off against Medeus, and just like Henri had done many years prior, he slew the Dragon King with his Falchion. This conflict would later be known as the War of Shadows, but sadly it would not be the last battle Marth fought, as trouble was brewing on the horizon. After the war, Marth became the 5th king of Altea, and also engaged himself to Princess Shida. Meanwhile, in Orlus, Prince Hardin wed Princess Nina and became the 24th Emperor of Arcania, restoring the continent with amazing speed. Unbeknownst to the public, however, a tragedy was going on behind the scenes. While Hardin was overjoyed over his marriage with Nina, Nina's heart belonged to the former leader of the Sable Order, Camus. Once Hardin sensed this, he fell into a deep, brooding depression, and isolated himself within his chambers, refusing to see anyone. At the peak of his suffering, he was approached by a hooded merchant who offered him a strange artifact, an orb of pure darkness known as the Dark Sphere. Unbeknownst to Hardin, this merchant was actually Gharnef, whose soul had been trapped in the orb and later revived by his followers. The Dark Sphere, while offering great power to its wielder, also had the ability to corrupt their heart, amplifying their anguish and making them lose themselves. With Hardin already deep in despair, the sphere easily corrupted him. Resenting Nina for rejecting him, Hardin was quick to hand his wife over when Gharnef asked for her. In the following months, Hardin's rule turned more oppressive with each passing day, and soon enough a rebellion broke out in Grust's. Led by General Lorenz, outraged over Hardin's treatment of his people, the citizens of Grust's openly defied Arcanaea's authority. Since Altea was now a suzerain state of the Empire, Marth was tasked with quelling the rebellion. It saddened him greatly to leave home, especially as he was just about to wed Shida, but his duties came first and he could not refuse a command from the Emperor of Arcanaea. With a heavy heart, he rounded up a small group of knights and headed to Grust to quell the rebellion. It didn't take Marth long to realize that something was very wrong. The man overseeing Marth's mission, General Lang, was a cruel tyrant known for his brutality towards the civilians. Lang claimed that he would butcher the families of the rebels to send a message, something that horrified Marth. After quelling the first rebellion and watching General Lorenz take his own life rather than being captured, Marth was quickly sent to quell a second rebellion, this time in Macedon. At this point, however, tensions between General Lang and the Altean Knights was at a breaking point, as they had difficulties tolerating his tyrannic tactics. When Marth was ordered to go search for the captured Grustian royal children, Eubello and Eumina, who had been taken away earlier by Ogma, Jagan snapped at the rude and dishonorable general, threatening him to a fight. This caused Lang to run away, vowing that there would be consequences for his actions. After finding the royal children, Marth decided that General Lang had to be brought to justice for his crimes against the Grustian people. Even though he knew his actions would anger the Empire, Marth was confident that he would be able to explain things to Hardin and avoid a potential war. Inside Lang's fortress, Marth killed the cowardly general and encountered his old friend, the Bishop Wendell, who was imprisoned within. Wendell informed him that the Star Sphere, one of the artifacts used to create the Starlight Tome in the War of Shadows, had been shattered into many pieces due to the strain of creating the spell, and that pieces were spread all over the continents. He tasked Marth with recovering the shards, stating that it was of great importance to Arcanaea's future. On Wendell's advice, Marth traveled to the Fane of Raman to recover some of the lost pieces, but when he arrived he found that it had been looted by thieves. He continued onwards to Kaismer Bridge, but there something unexpected happened. Hardin, leading a large force of Arcanaean soldiers, intercepted them, bent on punishing them for disobeying the Empire. Marth attempted to talk to Hardin, but found him completely unrecognizable from the man he had once known. Furthermore, Hardin was shielded by a strange aura of darkness, making him impervious to harm, eerily similar to the protection Gharnef had possessed in the previous war. With no chance to defeat Hardin, Marth and his knights were forced to flee by ship north to Khadin. In Khadin, they encountered more resistance, as the mages were loyal to Hardin, and they had to fight their way into the desert. Once Marth had captured the city of Khadin though, he was contacted by the sage Godo, using magic to talk to him. Godo informed Marth that Hardin's protection stemmed from the dark sphere he was holding, and instructed Marth to travel through Anri's Way, a path previously traveled by his ancestor, and seek out the Ice Dragon Shrine. There, Godo would bestow upon him the Light Sphere, which had the ability to counter Hardin's Dark Sphere, and he would also restore the previously broken Star Sphere if Marth managed to collect all the shards. Heeding Godo's advice, Marth set out on the hazardous journey through the region known as Anri's Way. He traversed fiery volcanoes, journeyed through harsh deserts, and climbed frozen mountains, fighting vicious barbarians, dragons and wyverns along the way, until he finally reached the Ice Dragon Shrine. Upon meeting Godo, Marth obtained the Light Sphere, and handed the Star Shards to Godo to have him recreate the Star Sphere. Godo also instructed Marth to take the Manakit Tiki with him. She had been sleeping in the shrine, and Godo didn't have the heart to keep her locked up there any longer. Wishing Marth luck in the coming war, Godo warped him and his men back to Altea. Back in Altea, Marth found that his homeland had once again been invaded, but this time by the Arcanaean Empire. He found out that his mission to suppress the rebellion in Grust had merely been a diversion to get his knights away from their homeland so that it could be conquered by Hardin. For the second time in only a few short years, Marth had to liberate his own castle and free his people. Marth's next destination was Arcanaea, but to get there, he first had to go through the continent of his old enemy, Gra. When he arrived there though, he found that the nation had barely recovered from their massacre in the previous war, and what they faced on the battlefield now were not seasoned soldiers but fresh recruits, hardly knowing how to wield weapons. Upon seeing them break ranks when confronted with the elite Altean army, Marth wisely instructed his men not to pursue them, and instead to go straight for Gra Castle, where the daughter of the late King Geo, Princess Sheena, was observing the battle. Upon seeing that none of her new recruits were harmed, she decided that the Altean knights were not evil. She then joined them and allowed them to pass through Gra freely. Next, Marth continued his journey to Arcanea through the treacherous pass of Adria Peak. There he hoped to bypass Hardin's large army, as the pass led directly to the capital of Arcanea, and swiftly bring an end to Hardin's reign of terror. In the pass, he briefly met with the King of Orlus, Hardin's older brother, who gave him the Life Sphere, and ordered a large squadron of his knights to stand down, making Marth's journey a little easier. The Altean army still had to battle their way through the treacherous mountain pass though, but they were eventually able to reach the palace of Arcanea and invaded quickly. At this point, many Arcanean soldiers started rebelling against their emperor, and Marth found himself gaining the support of the people as they had had enough of Hardin's rule, now referring to him as the Dark Emperor. Inside the castle, Marth and his men squared off against Hardin's royal guard, and with the power of the Light Sphere, they were able to negate the barrier which was protecting the corrupted emperor. Even without this protection, however, he was a powerful foe, and fought ferociously with his Gradivus to keep his throne, but was eventually defeated. In his final moments, the darkness that had shrouded his heart faded away, and before dying, he expressed regret for his actions, claiming that if he had been stronger, he could have fought off the corruption of the Dark Sphere. Before he passed on, he told Marth that he had always loved Nina, and that he prayed she would one day forgive him for his actions. Believing his journey to be at an end, Marth discovered that the 4 missing noblewomen, his sister Alice, along with Lena, Maria and Nina, were all in the palace after he took it. However, when the Dark Sphere was picked up from the fallen Emperor's corpse, it was absorbed into Marth's shield, the Fire Emblem, and together with the Star Sphere, Light Sphere, Geosphere, and Life Sphere, the binding shield was reformed. The shield then revealed that the women were actually some of Gharnef's dark cultists in disguise. No longer hidden by their illusion, the dark cultists quickly teleported away. After driving the cultists away, Marth was once again contacted by Godo, who informed him of Gharnef's plan to revive Medeus, using the blood of the 4 maidens he had kidnapped. Marth knew that his journey was not over, and so he hurried to the Kingdom of Dol and the Dragon's Table, where Gharnef awaited him inside. Before entering, Marth encountered a wounded Michalis in a nearby village, who explained that he managed to survive his apparent death thanks to Maria praying for him. Moved by this act of kindness, he went off to try and save her from Gharnef. He failed, becoming heavily wounded in the process, but he did manage to steal Starlight from Gharnef and escape. He then gave Starlight to Marth before seemingly dying of his wounds. With this tome, however, Marth was able to defeat Gharnef inside the Dragon's Altar and take Falchion away from him. Deeper within the Dragon's Table, Marth discovered that Medeus was awakening from his long sleep, transformed into a terrifying shadow dragon. He also found the 4 missing noblewomen, still hypnotized by Gharnef's magic, ready to be sacrificed to strengthen Medeus. However, Marth's allies were able to free them from their hypnosis, and with the binding shield preventing the other Earth Dragons from aiding Medeus in combat, Marth drove the Falchion deep through Medeus' heart for a second time, seemingly killing him for good. This second war would later be known as the War of Heroes. After the war, Marth finally ascended to the throne and became the first king of the Arcanean Alliance, taking Sheeta as his bride. He worked tirelessly to restore his ruined kingdom. His reign was long and peaceful, and he went down in the history books as one of the greatest rulers Arcanea had ever seen, being referred to by his people as the Hero King. Faithful to the title given to him by his people, Marth is a true hero in every sense of the word. He is honorable, merciful, and kind, but also humble and down to earth. He doesn't shrink from his duties when they call him, but he also doubts himself a lot, often thinking himself unsuitable of the grand destiny laid out before him. Marth's biggest strength isn't his ability to fight, but how much he inspires loyalty in the soldiers around him. Though some credit should probably go to his love interest Sheeta in this regard, as she does a lot of recruiting behind the scenes, gathering many new allies to Marth's cause. Otherwise, there isn't really a lot to say about Marth in this regard. He doesn't have traditional support conversations in any of the games he is in, unless you count spin-off games such as Warriors, so there isn't a lot of material for me to analyze here. Some people would probably say Marth is generic, but I would simply choose to call him a classic.
I can accomplish nothing on my own. It's thanks to my friends I've come as far as I have.
Marth's debut in the West was actually in the Fire Emblem anime released in 1997, but most people are more likely to know him from Super Smash Bros. Melee. The anime gave Marth the surname of Lowell.
I am Mars. Mars Lowell, heir to the throne of Aricia.
The son of King Cornelius? You are truly he?
In the 4th Fire Emblem Heroes Choose Your Legends popularity poll, Marth ranked in at 3rd place in the male category with 44,107 votes. Marth has appeared in more games than any other character in the franchise barring Anna, with a total of 14 appearances. His anime voice actor, Spike Spencer, also voiced Exilus in Fire Emblem Awakening. His video game voice actor, Yuri Lowenthal, also voices Riken in Awakening, Kiragi and Corrin in Fates, and Eliwood, Bramimond, and Merrick in Heroes.
Legendary hero? Please, I've done nothing so grand as to earn such a title.
Alright, we got a lot to cover here. Marth appears in a lot of games. Fire Emblem 1, Fire Emblem 3 Book 1 and 2, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, and New Mystery of the Emblem. That's 5 different Marths. Yes, I know he's technically playable in Awakening and Fates 2, but I'm not really covering those today. Let's begin by taking a look at his similarities in each game. Marth is always going to be a sword-locked infantry unit that can't promote. Being the main character, he's the only one who can visit villages and seize thrones, and if he dies, it's a game over. For this reason, giving him the boots in most of the games he's in is considered a good idea, as his mobility will allow him to reach his destinations faster, especially since there's no rescuing in the game he's in, aside from the coveted rescue staff in the later variants, that is. Marth always comes with his trademark rapier that's effective against armor knights and cavaliers, and is relatively high on hit and crits, though a little low on might. Marth can also open chests once he obtains the Fire Emblem, which allows him to work as a part-time thief. He can also eventually obtain the Falchion, which is kinda useful against Manakits and the final boss, though this is actually optional in most of the games, as you don't need it to win. Marth is usually kinda squishy, and his base stats leave a lot to be desired, but his growth rates are actually pretty decent. And if you put a lot of effort into training him, he will become good eventually, though he'll never be able to attack or retaliate at range, except for with the Love and Sword. Now let's take a look at how he performs in each of the games. In Fire Emblem 1, Marth is actually one of the better units you have. While almost every unit in this game has utterly crap growth rates, Marth's growths are actually really good. He can't promote, but neither can a lot of the other units in your army. Marth's lack of range in this game isn't as noticeable either, as javelins and hand axes are really bad in Fire Emblem 1. In this game, the Mercurius sword is also locked to him, as no one else can use it, and it has the strange effect of boosting his growth rates. Or at least that's what people thought it did for some time. It's actually been proven that it doesn't increase his growths, but rather gives him a 25% chance whenever he gains a stat to get 2 points in that stat instead. Kinda similar to how the Angel Ring in Gaiden works, except that it has a chance to occur, rather than just flat out giving you double stat gains. And no, this does not mean the Mercurius doubles growth rates. The Falchion Marth gets in this game is actually busted, as it seals any direct non-dragon attacks against him, making him practically invulnerable to physical harm. This is funny because the enemy AI in FE1 will always target Marth if they can, meaning that with this sword, they will helplessly attempt to gang up on him while being unable to lay even a finger on the guy, allowing Marth to keep his allies safe on the front lines. In Fire Emblem 3, Book 1, Marth hasn't changed very much, aside from having a 10% higher weapon level growth. Other units in the game have been buffed though, and Marth has stayed relatively the same, so by comparison he may seem a little weaker, but he's still an alright unit. For some reason his rapier has 10% less hit in this game, and the Mercurius is no longer locked to him, nor does it affect anyone's growth rates. In this game, the Falchion no longer seals direct attacks, and you probably want to avoid getting it altogether, as the Star Sphere is on steroids in this game, boosting a character's growth rates by 30% and preventing weapon durability from running out entirely. Holding on to it and foregoing the Falchion entirely is much better if you want to play around with it, but it's not needed as the game is extremely easy. In Book 2, Marth joins at level 3 instead of 1, so his bases are a bit better to compensate, but he still performs most of the same as a unit. In this game, you don't get to play around with the Star Sphere, but you can use the Star Shards to influence growth rates, though Marth isn't really the ideal target for this, as he will probably cap out his most important stats, though I suppose you could give him a shard to boost his strength growth a little bit, as he does have trouble capping that. In Book 2, Marth fights a lot less armor knights and cavaliers as the story progresses, so his rapier is a little less viable. Marth will eventually obtain the Binding Shield, which will seal away all Earth Dragons on the map at the start of each turn, and the Falchion will also be given to him if he defeats Gharnef in the next to last map, though he only gets to play around with it in the final battle against Medeus. In Shadow Dragon, Marth is arguably at his weakest in the series. He still has above average growth rates, but his bases leave a lot to be desired, especially on the harder difficulties. Due to his inability to promote, he can level to 30, but this still means he has 10 less levels to grow compared to most other units, though most players will probably not reach max level with him anyway, and furthermore this also means he will never gain promotion bonuses. In this game you can forge his rapier to make it more effective, and this seems good on paper, as 1 might effectively translate to 3 against the game's many armor knights and cavaliers, but this is ridiculously expensive to do with the rapier's high base costs, and also requires a lot of extra might to make it successfully one-shot, as the rapier has less might and often faces weapon triangle disadvantage against the enemies it's effective against. The gold spent on this is usually better invested into the cheaper and much stronger wing spear, so forging the rapier should only really be done if you're desperate for Marth to get kills. In this game, the falchion is also not considered that good against the final boss, as on higher difficulties, Marth will seldom survive combat against Medeus, so it's much better to rely on characters like Tiki or Nagi for this purpose. I guess this game is called Shadow Dragon because Marth is a shadow of his former self. Those pants must really have nerfed him. In New Mystery of the Emblem, Marth is a lot better due to having significantly higher bases. His growth rates have also received a big boost, but so has every other unit in the game. While he is still being held back by his usual weaknesses, being sword-locked, foot-locked, and being busy visiting villages and opening chests, he's a lot less useless in this game compared to Shadow Dragon, and can actually grow into a very competent combat unit, especially once he obtains the Binding Shield, which grants him +2 to every stats. The enemies he faces in this game are also a lot more easy for him to handle, including more axe-wielding enemies and dragons, which he can fight with a Forged Wormslayer. While the falchion isn't really needed against the final boss, it sure helps a lot. And thanks to the Binding Shield, a speed-capped Marth can avoid being doubled by Medeus even on the hardest difficulty, something he could never achieve in Shadow Dragon. Many discussions have been had regarding Marth's unique utility over the years. Some people say that him being able to visit villages and open chests is a strength, but I think it's more fair to argue that it's a weakness, as it locks Marth into doing other things than fighting. Overall, Marth is often more of a liability on the battlefield, as you have to spend most of your time figuring out how to get him from point A to point B without dying, and that's not a great position for a lord to be in. Still, if you take your time to train him in most of the games he's in, carefully feeding him kills and ensuring he doesn't die, he can grow into a decent combat unit that can hold his own on the front lines. At the end of the day, despite being the original quote-unquote generic sword-wielding lord, Marth is actually one of the more interesting main characters in the series, and the debates on whether or not he's good or bad continues to be had in the community 3 decades after his initial game came out. Like I said in the personality segment, Marth isn't an incredibly interesting or complex character. I wouldn't say he's a bad protagonist. In fact, I think that he's a really solid one. I find myself liking Marth and his role in the stories he's in a lot. I just can't write a detailed essay analyzing his character from start to finish, but I still think Marth is a really good main character. 3 out of 5 stars.
I don't want anyone to die. Surely you feel the same way.
Whether it be as a guy not wearing pants or his more modern incarnation with a more tasteful attire, I think Marth's design is iconic and very pleasant to look at. He may be a quote-unquote generic sword lord, but at least his appearance stands out to me. His cipher art is gorgeous and I love his legendary alt and heroes. 4 out of 5 stars.
I enjoy this time with you. My troubles seem to melt away.
It's hard to give Marth one general utility rating, as his usefulness varies a little from game to game. If I were to rate them in sequence, I would say that he is at his best in the first game, then in Fire Emblem 3, then New Mystery of the Emblem, and lastly Shadow Dragon. Overall though, despite all of his interesting quirks and traits, it's hard to classify Marth as anything above average in this regard, as he is a bit of a liability in most of the games he's in. 3 out of 5 stars.
You too are blessed with wonderful allies.
Thank you so much for watching this Fire Emblem character spotlight. This was quite the task and I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please consider leaving a like and a comment. I'd also like to thank my wonderful script readers who helped me out with the scripts. Thank you so much. If you guys enjoyed the spotlight, let me know what you think about Marth as a character. Do you think he's overrated? Underrated? And what do you think about the Arcanea games as a whole? I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments below. At any rate, my name is Mengs, and here's to 30 amazing years of Fire Emblem, and hopefully many more to come. I love you guys, and I love this series. Happy birthday to Fire Emblem and all of its fans across the world.